That's good stuff. The sun is up, the drinks are hot, and now it's time for our first cup. Today, mental health. So, it's June. It's a new month. And with a new month, that means that there are new causes to kind of advocate for and be aware of. And I really like June because June is something very important to me. It's Men's Mental Health Awareness Month. I've talked about this before, never on this show, but in a lot of other places online. And, I'd like to bring that to First Cup today. Uh, to be clear, we have made massive strides in mental health, just kind of like generally, in mental health and understanding generally in my lifetime. Like, by way of example, you know, when I was a kid in elementary school, corporal punishment was still an option. Like, it was a straight up option. Like, you could, if you wanted to, sign up your kid. And when I say your kid, I really mean your son, because interestingly enough, I don't think I ever saw this option used on any girls in my school. But you could sign up your kid to have swats applied to their backside with a wooden paddle by the principal if they acted up enough. If the school admin thought that it was warranted, you could literally get your kid swatted in school. Now, my parents didn't sign me up for that, but I knew boys that were signed up for that, right? That was part of my elementary school experience, part of my foundational experience, right? Um, and I don't think that it would necessarily fly in 99% of places today, right? Um, which is great. I mean, that's a sign of progress, right? Uh, but like with anything, when you make a bunch of progress in a short period of time, and in this instance, I mean, in a few short decades, I think it's important to kind of look at what you may have missed while you're making that progress, to kind of understand where some of your blind spots are, and to just kind of reevaluate where you might go. Now, to illustrate, one way you can do this, I'm going to use something totally unrelated to mental health, to men's mental health. I'm going to use uh, your phone, specifically an iPhone, if you have one of those. I'm a big Apple fanboy. I've always appreciated their approach to design and to user experience, to simplicity and removing, friction from technological interactions. Uh, but you may be surprised to hear that an app as basic as health was missing something pretty big in its first few iterations, right? Like way back in the early days of the iPhone, there was a health app, uh, but it was missing menstrual tracking, right? And when you look back at that and you think about that, you're probably thinking like, wow, that's a pretty big oversight. And yeah, it is. It's something that's relevant to at least half of the world, right? For a large portion of their life, and it just wasn't in the early versions of the health app. Now, when we look at why it wasn't there, there's a few reasons, but one I think that is really important to kind of pull out is that the engineering team that built the health app was all men, right? It was, in fact, I think 14 men. I'll have to check my notes. Somebody double check that for me, but 14 men built the app, right? So it didn't occur to them necessarily. And to be clear, this is why having a diversity of insights and inputs when you're building something can be very important, right? Things that are obvious to one group of people, not necessarily obvious to all groups of people. And good news about the health app too. If you go and you look at it now, guess what? There's cycle tracking. If you need cycle tracking, it's in there. So there was an oversight in the beginning, while this massive improvement in technology was going on, and they corrected that oversight, right? They've owned up to it, which is great. So what does that whole story have to do with men's mental health? Well, as of this recording, in the United States, depending on your numbers, about 75% of mental health practitioners are women. And when you look at people who are going to graduate school to get the advanced degrees, the skills, the training, and do the theory and technique of providing mental health services, most of the students there that are coming in, depending on your estimates, between 80 and 90% are women as well. And the degrees that are being granted on the other end, people who matriculate all the way through, between 75 and 80% women. Now, that imbalance is not like a 14-0 like total blank out, right? But in my experience, when you have such a lopsided composition of people who are practitioners and who are kind of building the theory and who are kind of creating the justifications for everything that comes after, whoever's not in that majority voice is going to be kind of shut out in a lot of ways, uh, if they're not explicitly included. And unfortunately, we're at a point where a lot of perspectives about men and masculinity and just kind of like men's mental and emotional existence, they're not necessarily taken as seriously as they should be, right? We're in that stage where we're kind of looking at the health app and going, there's something missing here. And while I think that we can be on the path to improve those deficits, we've got a lot of work to do before we get there. But I also know that a lot of the people who are listening to me right now are not mental health professionals, nor are you in school to be mental health professionals. So you're probably asking yourselves, okay, Ian, this is great, but what do I do? Like, what about me? I'm just a regular sort of human. Well, I'll tell you what you can do, regular sort of human. Before I do, though, we're going to do a little interactive exercise here real quick. Okay? Take a moment, whatever you're doing, just put it down for a moment and just close your eyes and listen to my voice. We're going to go through a really quick exercise here. Close your eyes. Yeah, there we go. Nice and tight. All right. In a moment, I'm going to say a word. And what I want you to do after I say this word is out loud say the first word that you associate with that word, the first thing that comes to mind. Okay? Just whatever comes to mind, just say it out loud. All right? And the word is masculinity. Open your eyes. Now, if you're like most people, the first word that you're going to say, that you're going to associate with masculinity is the word toxic. And if it's not the first word, I can almost guarantee you it's going to be in the top 3. Right? You know me, I'm a guy that loves to kind of interrogate, pick apart, and counteract bias and build forward from it. And as part of that, something that I like to say, which is absolutely relevant in this moment, is that I don't think that most of you who said toxic almost immediately, I don't think that's something that you intended to have in your life. I don't think that's something that you intended to have in your head. I don't think it's a connection that you were like taught. Now, yes, there are people that are like where it's drilled into them, right? Or they specifically seek out that perspective. But most of you who brought that word toxic to mind, you are a product of the environment in which you are in. You're a product of the modern social, media, educational, and political landscape. And while toxic masculinity can be a useful concept, we must not conflate masculinity with toxicity at this like 1-to-1 ratio, right? You want to know what you can do? You can start questioning every time you see that connection and ask yourself, where can I find something that's not toxic but is masculinity? Where can I expose myself to tonic masculinity, to good masculinity? Where can I see these things, and how can I kind of counteract this thing that's been built into me? And if you want to go one step further than that, you can also sit back and realize that you're not the only one who makes that association. And in fact, unfortunately, a lot of the men in your life are also going to have that snap response. And if you can find a way to help them see themselves beyond that toxicity, if you can explicitly make space for them to be more than toxicity, to be complete in their masculinity, not just one-sided about it, you'll do a lot. You'll do a lot for them. Because when they have that safety, when people have that safety to be more complete, to be a whole range of things, that safety can be turned into bravery. Bravery, which is great fuel for pursuit of doing better. Bravery, which is really something that can reflect the better parts of masculinity and of men's mental health. Now, I know that I don't usually do this, but in case you want to learn more about what's going on with boys and men and masculinity and mental health, I can highly recommend this book by Richard Reeves called Of Boys and Men. I'll put a link to it down in the description. And also, if you don't have time to read, or if you want to do a little bit more than that, Reeves just founded this thing called the American Institute for Boys and Men, I believe. It's aibm.org, and they're also on social media. I'll put some links down below as well. I found them to be great resources, to be very useful conversation starters. And as a man, it's just, I like the visibility that they give to issues that I've faced and that people near and dear to me have faced as well. But all that said, please remember that no matter what you've heard or what I've said, death comes for us all, and a closed mouth never gets fed. Take care of yourselves, take care of your men, and I'll see you again soon.